Hey guys, my name's Mackenzie, and I'll be talking to you about vitamin B12 today. So vitamin B12 is a vitamin that I've heard about pretty much a lot of times in my life, but I didn't really understand what it does to the body or why it's so important in keeping us really healthy and strong. This vitamin is very unique in two different ways. The first way is that animal products are the only reliable resource of vitamin B12. And second, it is the only vitamin that contains the mineral cobalt in its structure. So it's very commonly called cobalamin. And then there's the little structure in the bottom right hand corner. So it looks a little complicated, but there's cobalt in it. And the RDA is set for 2.4 micrograms per day, while the daily value on the back of food labels and supplements is set at 6 micrograms per day. So on average, men eat about 6.3 micrograms per day, and women will eat roughly 4.6 micrograms per day. And these are both above the 2.4 micrograms that's recommended from the RDA. But this is due to the fact that there haven't been really any adverse side effects recorded for taking an excess B12 daily, and there isn't a UL set for the vitamin for that reason, so it's not going to be dangerous to our body if we take in a little more than is recommended for us. So that's good. And vitamin B12 is an important vitamin that has several different functions in the body. First, it is needed in the enzymatic reactions that occur in the body, and it keeps our nerve cells healthy and working correctly. It works closely with the water-soluble nutrient folate to help make our red blood cells, and it also helps with iron to make it work better in the body. And they work together to produce SAM, and this is a compound that is involved in an immune function and mood. And it's a really long name that I don't know how to say, so we simplified it down to SAM. And the vitamins B12, B6, and B9 all work together closely, and they help keep our blood levels under control of homocysteine, which is an amino acid. And high levels of this amino acid can be a risk factor of heart disease. And it's not necessarily a cause of heart disease, but it can be an indicator that a person might have the heart disease. So just like a risk factor for it. And then for food sources, so plants are not able to synthesize vitamin B12. Mainly microorganisms, specifically bacteria, synthesize all the compounds of this vitamin. So it is a unique vitamin in which animal products are only the reliable resource of it. And some of the main food sources are meat, poultry, seafood, eggs, and dairy products. And organ meats are very rich in B12, like liver, kidneys, and heart. And then they're also in cereals, since they're fortified foods. They like to put that B12 in there to really fortify that cereal. And it's difficult for vegans and vegetarians to get enough vitamin B12 in their diet since they don't eat any kind of meat. So they may need to rely on supplements in order to get their recommended amounts of vitamin B12. Alright, and then for deficiency and symptoms, there's kind of a lot that goes towards vitamin B12. So if you're not getting enough, it's very dangerous. So the first one, it has to do with severe malabsorption of the vitamin, in which there's insufficient levels of intrinsic factor being produced. And some of the causes of these are pernicious anemia, which is an autoimmune disorder. And that actually, I looked it up and it means leading to death. So that's what pernicious means. So that's not good. And also, if you remove all or part of the stomach, that can also lead to the insufficient intrinsic factor production, as well as the gastric bypass surgery, because then you'll just completely pass up the stomach. So that's not good. And then for malabsorption, limited vitamin B12 release from food proteins. So there's a lot that goes on with that. Another gastric bypass surgery. There's a drug in their medication that's used to lower the blood sugar in type 2 diabetes that can lead to the limited release of the food protein, drugs that block the stomach acid production, and also an H. pylori infection, which limits the HCl production and the activation of pepsin. And the pepsin enzyme is released, it releases B12 from the food proteins. And then for the mild or severe malabsorption, which is a disorder of the ileum in the intestines, it's just a disease of the small intestines, such as inflammatory bowel disease, celiac disease, intestinal overgrowth, or the actual surgical removal of the ileum. And then also another impairment is low vitamin B12 dietary intake. And that's mostly a lot of them people that don't get enough vitamin B12 are vegans or vegetarians, or the ingestion of breast milk from B12 deficient mothers can also lead to that too. So there's a bunch of symptoms of the deficiency. And then more on that, these go into a little more detail. So the macrocytic anemia is when vitamin B12 deficiency is severe enough that the body stores are gone or almost gone. And not taking enough B12 impairs the folate metabolism since they work hand in hand. Normal DNA and red blood cell synthesis is messed up and it just doesn't work right. And then neurologically, it's pretty dangerous too. So it can lead to nerve degeneration, which can lead to death. And this causes tingling, burning, numbness, pain in the legs, and also in the hands too, and then walking and balance become very difficult. Mental problems can occur, such as loss of concentration, memory, disorientation, and dementia as well. And as it continues, as the deficiency goes on, if you don't get any more, your bowel and bladder control is gone, your sight is disturbed, and the GI tract problems can occur. So all of these happen after the initial development of the anemia. So it'll just keep going and going and going if you don't get more of that vitamin B12 in there. And then high levels of homocysteine, which is a risk factor for heart attacks and strokes, and are connected with cognitive dysfunction and osteoporotic fractures. So that's not good either. And then this affects 20% of older Americans due to the impaired absorption of B12 in foods from atrophic gastritis. So they are a little more affected than most people since their bodies aren't working the same with the absorption of vitamin B12. And then just as I said before, for the toxicity, there isn't any adverse effects that have been recorded from taking in extra vitamin B12, so there isn't an upper limit set. And then functions and metabolism. There's a lot of enzymes and forms of vitamin B12 that are active in metabolism, and a lot of those I don't know how to say, so we'll try it. But so for the first one, these two are forms of vitamin B12 that are active in the metabolism. And then vitamin B12 is required for a few of the enzymatic reactions that go on. So the formation of methionine from homocysteine, which are both amino acids, it's catalyzed by the enzyme methionine synthase that requires vitamin B12 coenzyme methylcobalamin, I think. And then the interrelationship between vitamin B12 and folate with the same amino acids, which is also catalyzed by the enzyme methionine synthase. This reaction generates cobalamin and methionine. And then, as I said before, cobalamin is another name for vitamin B12. And then the methylmonal mutase requires this form of vitamin B12, which is needed for the metabolism of fatty acids, with an odd number of carbon molecules, allowing them to be oxidized in the citric acid cycle to provide energy. And I looked that up a little bit more, and it said that usually the fatty acids will have an even number, and so these just help the odd-numbered ones of carbon molecules in the fatty acids to be able to provide the energy into our bodies. And then what I found most interesting is a higher intake of vitamin B12 from people who eat meat regularly provides 2 to 3 years of storage of this vitamin in the liver. which is kind of cool because a lot of the times most of the water-soluble vitamins don't stay in the body. They'll just kind of cycle through and be excreted. So I think it's cool that you can have a storage, especially since the deficiency is so fatal, it's kind of scary. But the liver can also store enough B12 to last many years, which is unlike other water-soluble vitamins. And the discovery of this vitamin and how it can prevent the B12 deficiency disease called pernicious anemia were so considerable that researchers in the field won 6 Nobel Prizes between 1934 and 1965. So that's good they discovered that, because there's lots of problems that go on with that. And animals get their vitamin B12 from the soil while they're grazing, from the bacteria that's in the soil. And then cows and sheep can synthesize vitamin B12 from bacteria within several sections of their stomachs. So that's kind of cool. We're only used to one stomach, but they have lots of stomachs going on there. So they're able to synthesize that vitamin B12. And then healthy adults absorb close to half of the B12 in the food they eat. So about 50% is absorbed, which is really cool for that. And then I also looked up an article about 5 reasons that we need more vitamin B12. And this was just on the Washington Post article. And so basically the author talks about the symptoms of having a vitamin B12 deficiency, such as memory loss, depression, weakness, megaloblastic anemia, numbness and tingling in the hands and feet, as well as the nerve problems with that nerve degeneration that we were talking about. And she stresses the importance of getting enough in the diet, since 15% of Americans aren't getting enough vitamin B12, and the deficiency can go undiagnosed for years. So some people are at risk for deficiency, including vegetarians, vegans, from not eating meats, and people who regularly drink alcohol. And since alcohol really affects the liver, and the liver is where the vitamin B12 is stored, that can really disrupt the storage of vitamin B12. And then the absorption of B12 is affected from taking medications to help with stomach problems, such as acid reflux, as well as those with diabetes or other autoimmune diseases. So a lot of B12 has to do with the stomach and the intestines, as well as the liver. So it's really important. So in conclusion, vitamin B12 is very important in maintaining several systems in the body and keeping us strong and healthy. And it's crazy to think that something so small plays such a huge role in keeping us functioning daily. So definitely make sure to eat your vitamins B12 every day. Even if you don't eat meat, make sure you get in your vitamin B12, because you do not want to deal with those deficiencies. It's very important. So thank you for listening.